What's happening, everyone? Welcome into Phillies Stoplight. Today is August 17th, 2025. I'm Anthony SanFilippo, filling in for Tim Kelly, who's away this weekend and not able to do the stoplight. So you get me. And I think that there are three very interesting things to talk about that we learned from this weekend's split with the Washington Nationals. That's probably an outcome that nobody is happy with. You thought you're facing the stinky Nats and a very young and inexperienced team, especially with a terrible bullpen. The Phillies should have probably at least won three, if not all four games. Instead, they come away with a 2-2 split. And it was hairy how they had to do it. It wasn't an easy split by any means. Um, but the big news from the weekend, and probably the one that's most concerning on a lot of levels, is Zack Wheeler going on the injured list with a blood clot in his shoulder. Now, we don't have any further details. All we know is that his shoulder was feeling some heaviness in it after his start on Friday. So on Saturday morning, he went and checked with the doctors in Washington, who are the Nationals doctors, and they identified the blood clot. And so Zack Wheeler came home early to Philadelphia. He's seeing the Phillies doctors, and we probably won't get an update until at least Monday on what the prognosis is and what the game plan is for him. But it's a scary thing. I mean, blood clots travel, and obviously you don't want to get a blood clot to travel to a different part of his body. It could become life-threatening. So, on a human level, everybody is hoping for the best for Zack Wheeler and for his family. Um, but from a baseball perspective, and we have to look at it from that perspective because that's what we do here at On Pattison. It's what we're tasked with writing and talking about. No one knows how much time he will miss, but if it's any indication, if you look at other athletes and other sports that have had this happen, you're probably looking at a minimum of 3 months for a recovery. Now, I want to put a little caveat on that. I don't want to make that saying that that's a definite that he has to miss 3 months because it's not, because baseball is not a contact sport. And usually the reason that um, that guys miss a lot of time, and I give you Victor Wembanyama as probably the most recent example for the San Antonio Spurs in the NBA. He found out that he had a blood clot right after the All-Star break in February and then missed the rest of the season for the Spurs. But sports like basketball and football, obviously, hockey, those sports are contact sports. And so therefore you run a real danger of having blood related issues in contact sports that maybe you don't have as much of a risk in baseball. But the minimum treatment on blood clots are usually 3 months. So that's why I throw that time out there. That it doesn't necessarily mean that Wheeler's going to miss 3 months, but it's not a simple injury, if a condition, whatever. It's not a simple one, and so therefore the Phillies need to prepare like they may not have him. If Zack Wheeler can come back and pitch and be healthy, that would be fantastic, right? I mean, obviously everybody is rooting for that. But I think the Phillies have to at least start to formulate a plan because you don't know. Everybody's different with curing a blood clot. You don't know how long he's going to miss. So something has to be kind of formulated there. Um, the Phillies do have good starting pitching depth. In essence, they do. They still have five starters at the major league level, with Aaron Nola coming back to today on Sunday. But that's what we're getting to. The second point of this stoplight is Aaron Nola looked terrible in the third inning of this game. And he gave up 6 runs, blew a 6-0 lead. Of course, the Phillies go on to win the game, ultimately 11-9. Should never have gotten to that point. They were winning 6-0 going into the bottom of the third. And Aaron Nola strikes the first batter out in the third inning. and then gives up six hits and a walk. And a couple of the hits were, there was the little bloop single by C.J. Abrams. There was a double down the third base line that you could argue maybe Alec Boehm could get to that ball. I don't know. The point is that Nola made a lot of bad pitches in that third inning. He really did. And the concerning thing is the location on a lot of them because he was ahead in the count. Four of the batters he was ahead in the count or 1-1. I think one of them was 1-1. He was only behind in the count on one batter. It was the first single that he gave up. There was a walk mixed in there, and then he was the first. One of them was a first pitch. A lot of these pitches were just missing the location. You get ahead, you're throwing strikes, okay, fine. But Nola's not a guy who throws with velocity. We know this, right? His fastball is usually in the 92, 93 range. It's not there right now. I mean, the one sinker that he gave up a hit on, I believe, was 89.4 miles per hour when you look at it. So his velocity is still not where it normally is. But even when it's at its best, he's not blowing hitters away. Aaron Nola is a successful pitcher because he has a five pitch mix, because he's a guy who locates his pitches and he's able to find spots to throw to and hit those spots and keep hitters off balance. Several of these pitches that he gave up hits on, including the double down the line that maybe Alec Boehm could have stopped. Even that, those pitches were center cut, man. Like they were not hitting spots. They were middle of the zone. They were cutters that didn't cut. The one sinker was all right, bottom of the zone, but it was still completely in the strike zone. It wasn't like it was on the black or anything. You can't be pitching there and not throwing 97 miles per hour or higher, right? I mean, you could get guys to swing and miss at pitches that are in those spots if you throw with velocity. He doesn't, so he has to keep the ball down and keep the ball towards the corners, and he just wasn't hitting those spots. And the Nationals made him pay for it. Now, it was his first start in 3 months, so you can't kill the guy too much because of that. I mean, he hasn't started at the major league level for 3 months, but the Phillies lined it up so that he would be coming back against a young and inexperienced team like the Nationals with the idea of let's give him, he's got his next start will come against Washington as well. And then I think his third start, it might change now because they're down to five guys instead of the six-man rotation that Rob Thompson wanted to do. But I think the third start was going to come against Miami, also a young, inexperienced lineup, even though they're a better team than the Nationals. So it was like there was going to be a little bit of a ramp up even at the major league level that he wasn't going to be facing like this top competition. We'll see a little bit more at the next start. Let's remind everyone Ranger Suarez, going back to when he made his first start this season back in early May after missing some time in spring training and then also missing the first month of the season. He got torched by the Arizona Diamondbacks. They scored 7 runs against them, got 7 hits off them. There were a couple of walks in there. It was like 3 2/3 innings, whatever it was. He looked terrible in that first start. And then he rattled off 12 consecutive quality starts, 10 of which were 2 runs or less. So only 2 of those 12 that he gave up 3 runs. So 10 of them were 2 or fewer runs in at least 6 innings, some even longer than that. So it's possible that it was just one of those, hey, first game back, can't kill the guy. He actually looked pretty good the first 2 innings if we're being fair. But I think the red flags are certainly raised, right? It's like, okay, let's see what that next start looks like. It's got to be better than this because the thing with Nola is his last time he had pitched, or last 2 times he had pitched. Granted, he was pitching on that sprained ankle. He was roasted by the lineups that faced him then. The Cardinals absolutely killed him in his last start, which I believe was May 14th. So you look at those and you sit there and go, okay, well, that's an issue, right? I mean, it's the same thing that it was back in May. One start, we'll see. But all of a sudden, you start looking at this rotation. If you take Zack Wheeler out of the equation, obviously Christopher Sanchez, he's a Cy Young candidate, right? So okay, he's now at the top of the rotation. But then what else? What does the rest of the rotation kind of look like as you approach October? Well, there's very little confidence with Nola right now if you're watching it until you see that come back. If it comes back, we don't know. Ranger Suarez was pitching really, really well, but then after the All-Star break, he's not been good at all. He's really struggled. His velocity has been down since the All-Star break, and it keeps going down. It's worse now than it was a month ago. Um, what is Ranger just not able to pitch in the second half of the season? Is he limited that much that he can only throw you so many innings before he runs out of bullets? That there's a concern there. We got to figure. Phillies need to figure that out. Jesus Luzardo's been better his last 3 to 4 starts. He's looked a lot better. But we have seen some wild inconsistency with him over the course of the season. Now, if he's through the troubles that he had from late May till late July, if he's through what was bothering him for those 2 months, and he's back to being the pitcher he was in the first part of the season, then okay, I think you could feel better about it. But until we see this isn't just a stretch of 4 good starts, it's a consistency thing that he's back to where he was. Until we see that stretching into September, I don't think that you sit there and go, "Oh, I'm super confident in Jesus Luzardo at this point as well." At this moment, and it's stunning that I'm saying this on August 17th, Taijuan Walker is the second most consistent pitcher that the Phillies have. That's not to sit here and say that come October, when you're in the postseason, that Taijuan Walker is even starting a game for you. It's a testament to how well he's pitched this season, but it also tells you a little bit of something about where the rest of the rotation is at this point. And it's funny how things change in the sport of baseball, because a month and a half ago, it was not even a question that the Phillies had the best rotation in baseball. And they still may ultimately have that, um, depending on Wheeler, obviously, and depending on if Nola or Suarez, at least one of them, can get back to doing what they do well. And if Luzardo can be consistent, right? They still very well may have the best or one of the best rotations in baseball. But there are some question marks now. And when you look at the rotation, you have to start to wonder, is there enough time in the next 6 weeks to get everything right and to get enough of it right, at least, to feel good about it going into a postseason series against one of the other National League teams that they're going to face? Time will tell. That's kind of where we're at. The third thing, the final thing here on the spotlight today that we want to discuss is the offense, and they came out in spades today. The top 5 hitters in the lineup were 9 for 21 today. They scored 11 runs. They really worked the Nationals pitchers, which isn't really that hard to do because they're against the Nationals. But they did it. They did their job today. A couple of guys, Alec Boehm back in the lineup, hit a big 3-run homer. Also had a single. He had 2 hits. Nick Castellanos, who has been struggling mightily for the past 6 weeks. He finally had a good outing. He had a double and a home run. So that's something that's a positive for the Phillies. And Trey Turner continues to hit. He had a great weekend in Washington. He's kind of fixed whatever was not working for him. Schwarber had another key hit in there. So Harper had a couple of hits, couple RBIs. So the top of the lineup did its job, right? It did what they were supposed to do. But they are feast or famine all of a sudden. If the night before they get shut out by a guy, Cade Cavalli, who at one point was a top prospect for the Washington Nationals, but prior to yesterday, had only made 4 starts at the major league level, and he's 26 years old. His first start was when he was 22, right? So I mean, you're looking at a guy who's battled some injury things. He's not as the bloom is off the rose as far as being a top prospect is concerned. But the Phillies couldn't touch him, and they were shut out for the 8th time this year. And if you look at it, they were shut out twice in a week, once by the Reds and once by the Nationals, and almost were shut out a third time. Bryce Harper hit that solo home run against Cincinnati on Tuesday night, I believe it was. with two outs in the ninth inning. Otherwise, they would have been shut out in that game as well. They're one out away from being shut out a third time in a week. You cannot have that kind of wild inconsistency from either being a team that gets shut out or a team that scores 11 runs on a Sunday afternoon. Like you cannot be you can't have it be that disparate within the same week. They're Jekyll and Hyde. There needs to be more consistency. Sure, you're not going to have your best offensive game in every game. We understand that. That's baseball. But there needs to be more of what you saw today on a regular basis. And then, of course, if you have that bad game here or there, hey, you chalk it up. Or a pitcher pitches really well against you, tip your hat and you say, great game. But the fact of the matter is the Phillies have too much of this. And that's part of the problem. And, you look at the lineup and you don't feel confident really at any point beyond Bryce Harper. At some point, yeah, a couple games in Texas last weekend, the bottom of the lineup did a great job. They carried the Phillies because Schwarber and Harper didn't really hit in that series. But then they got to Cincinnati and nobody hit, right? And now you get to Washington, and it's a little bit more inconsistency. Yeah, Turner was hitting, but not much else was happening down there in Washington. So, like, you need more guys to be more regular. Let's put it that way, because Schwarber, Harper, those guys are not going to be able to carry you every game. At some point, somebody else has to do their job and pick those guys up because they can't do it every game. So the Phillies had a nice outing out of the offense today, but on the whole, when you look at the week, it was not a great week for the offense. Things are going to have to change. You're facing some really good pitching starting tomorrow with a home series against the Seattle Mariners, who come in with a really, really good pitching staff. And the Phillies are going to have to find a way to get some offense going. Look, they have a 5-game lead over the Mets, or it's 5.5 at the current moment. The Mets play Sunday Night Baseball Little League Classic tonight against the Mariners. By the time this is out on our social media channels, that game may or may not play. It may not have happened yet. So, but at the moment, it's 5.5. It's either going to be 5 or 6 by the end of the night. So you have a little bit of room there, but it could go away quickly. I mean, you saw just how fast they jumped ahead of the Mets and built this lead on the Mets, and the Phillies weren't even playing their best baseball. It's because the Mets were playing terrible. Well, guess what? If the Phillies run into some good pitching here against the Mariners, and all of a sudden, you let the Mets creep back into it, this becomes a race again. So the offense needs to start stepping up and do its job if the Phillies want to keep the distance between them and the Mets. And of course, you're in a dogfight with the winner of the National League West, whether it's the Padres or the Dodgers, and also in a sense the Cubs, if you end up falling out of the division lead, because you want as many home games as possible at Citizens Bank Park in the postseason. You have to get there, and you want to get that bye, right? So you want to get the bye. Right now, they're a half game up on the Dodgers. The Dodgers and Padres play today as well, so we'll see how that shapes up. But the offense needs to carry the team for a little bit. It really does. Until the starting pitching situation figures itself out and works itself out, the offense needs to be good, and you're facing a tough team against the Mariners. So it'll be interesting to see what happens. I'm sure Tim Kelly and I will do the next stoplight together. He usually likes to do them after the last game of a series, which will be Wednesday against the Mariners. We'll both be there at Citizens Bank Park. I'm sure we'll find a spot and talk some Phillies baseball with you then. So until that time, thanks for tuning into the Phillies Stoplight. I'm Anthony SanFilippo. Be sure to read all of our Phillies coverage at onpattison.com and follow us on social media. You can find us at onpattison everywhere, on X, on Facebook. We're on Threads. We're on Blue Sky, Instagram. Everywhere we're at, you can find us. Be sure to read all of our stuff at On Pattison. So once again, for Tim Kelly, who's hopefully on his way back from his weekend vacation, I'm Anthony SanFilippo saying thanks for tuning in, and we'll see you next time on The Stoplight.